Need to further reduce. Yes, can we start? Right, so good afternoon to all of you. Yeah. So yes, online students, good afternoon, good day, good morning. Better to say good day, isn't it?
Yes.
Right, online students, are you all there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, yeah. So good day to all of you. Right. Okay, fine. Now here you could see now last week we have started our discussion regarding business economics, and we have successfully completed the part one of our lesson one. Our lesson one was business firms and production decisions. So we have successfully completed the part one of that particular lecture material. Now, today is the 29th of January 2023, and we are going to start the part two of your lesson one. We are going to start the part two of your lesson one. Right, good. Okay, so can I have a summary? Anyone wish to provide a summary on last week's session? Any idea? Right, so last week what we have learned, a very simple way, what we have learned in last week. Yes, last week what we have learned, I think I have given you a summary in previous week as well regarding the things that we have done. So we started our lesson, that is business economics, and at the very beginning we understood the roadmap of this particular course unit, why you are learning this particular lesson, and how this series organized, and how we are going to be evaluated at the end, and what are the things that you need to do to successfully complete of this particular course unit. So that is the starting point in our first lesson. Then we started discussing about our particular lesson, that is business economics. So business economics is what? Business economics is what? In a very simple way, right? Yes. Online students, you can also join hands with these students. Business economics is what? Yes, Chandrakanti, Sandaruan, Senaratna. Yes, you can provide your ideas. Yes, business economics is what in a very simple way. Anyone from the audience?
Economic methodology to arrive at an optimal solution for the business problem.
Excellent. That's the answer, no? Yes, we are using economic theory with economic methodology to sort out a particular issue faced by companies. So that is what business economics is. Thank you very much. It's very good. Then what we did, we learned about the types coming under that. So we have prescriptive approach as well as descriptive approach. Now, descriptive means by looking at the behavior, we are providing hypothesis. Right, so by looking at the people behave in the market, we believe that once the price increases, demand decreases likewise. So that is descriptive role of economics. Then when it's come to the prescriptive role, what happens? We prescribe what to do. Right, it would be better to have this kind of a minimum wage levels. Right, better to provide free education. So those are some of the prescriptions that we would provide. So that is prescriptive role of business economics, and business economics is more towards on this prescriptive role. Okay, right. So then what we did? Then what we did? Yes, we started discussing about the production function. So production function is what? It simply illustrates the relationship between input and output. So output is a function of the inputs. The output depends on the inputs. That's what production function is very simple way. Then so we got to know that. Good. There are two types of production functions: short-run production function and long-run production function. And if we consider about inputs that we are using in the short run, we are having two types of inputs. What are those? Well, they are having fixed inputs and they are having variable inputs. Fixed input and we have variable input. Accordingly, in the short run, we are having fixed cost as well as variable cost. Right. So that is our short run production, and we got to know why we call it as short run, because at the initial stage, you are not in a position to bring more cash into the company. Accordingly, you have to act in a more disciplined manner, financially disciplined manner. Right. Then the other one is what? Long run production fund. Right. Long run production fund. In the long run, are we having two inputs or we are having only one input? Because we are having inputs, but all these inputs are now variable. You can change whatever the way that you wish, because now you are generating huge amount of cash flows. You are thinking pattern is different. You can identify the markets. Different things are there. Accordingly, you can expand your business. Automatically, your fixed inputs become variable. In the previous stage, you might have worked with one factory, but now you can open up new factories locally as well as abroad. Okay, so that's the basic things we discussed under production function. Then we discuss about the concepts of product, isn't it? We discuss about total product, right? So that is the output that you could generate by using the given amount of inputs. Then we discuss about average product, that is what? The output that a one particular labor would produce. Average product, simply total output, you are going to divide it by quantity. Then we discuss about marginal product, which means if you increase or decrease your labor units by one, what is the corresponding change in your output? Simply delta total product divided by delta labor. Delta labor. The previous one is so average product is equal to total product divided by labor. Clear? So then we understood the behavior of three curves: total product curves, average product curve and the marginal product curve in a very basic sense. But we learn about there is something called diminishing marginal returns, diminishing marginal returns or low variable proportions. So that's happened in the short run. So when the when the producer is operating with a given level of input, right? So he can input his variable, he can increase its variable inputs. But there is some point where he cannot increase his fixed inputs. Accordingly, what happened? The average product and the marginal productivity of his variable inputs is getting lower. So that is what we know as diminishing marginal returns or low variable proportions. And that's only happened in the short run. That's only happened in the short run. Right. So based on that, we analyze that particular curve, why this curve is moving this way, why it's first declining, everything. Right. Then we started discussing about long run production function. In there, we got to know that yes, all our inputs could be changed. Right. Simply our scale could expand. We can expand our scale. Accordingly, we can increase our returns. So there are three things: increasing return to scales, decreasing return to scales, and constant return to scales. So those are the very basic things that we have discussed in our last week series. Is that okay for you all? Clear? Right? Yes, online students, are you all okay? Yes, are you all okay?
Yes, sir.
Right. So if you have any doubt, you can ask. Right? Yes, students, any doubts? Have you studied? So I truly believe that you all went home and studied. Am I correct? Is it fair to believe in that nature? Huh? My goodness. They say yes. Good. Thank you very much. Huh? So keep it up. Huh? Keep it up. Right. So today we are going to start our next lesson. Now today is 29th of January. Accordingly, we are going to start our second part of our first lesson. So still we are in our first lesson, business terms and production decisions, but now we are moving to part 2 of that particular lesson. Right. So actually we discussed about the IL laws. In our previous presentation, I discussed about IL laws. IL laws means what? IL laws, intended learning outcomes. Yes, intended learning outcomes. The things that you could perform once you complete a particular topic, IL laws. Right. So hope you remember that at the very beginning I have asked you why you need to study business economics. It is because to come up or to match with the given IL laws, you need to perform such IL laws. Right? Okay. So that one we discussed in our last week presentation. Since this is a continuation of the last week session, we haven't mentioned the IL laws here, but it's already given in our previous lecture material. Right? So today we are going to start with these things. Your second part in production, business terms and production decision. You will see the first thing is we are going to discuss about production function with two variable inputs, marginal rate of technical substitution, general properties of isocons. There is something called isocons, isocost, general properties of isocons. Again, it's a copy paste here, the same thing repeating. Then we are going to discuss about law of return to scales. Actually, we have discussed these things, law of return to scales, but now we are going to discuss this in a more detailed. And finally, expansion path. Finally, expansion path. Right. So this is the agenda for this particular lesson. Right. So production function with two variables. Now, in the short run, you have learned that you have only two inputs. One is fixed and the other one is variable. One is fixed and the other one is variable. But now we are going to discuss about our production function with variable inputs. All our inputs are now variable, meaning that now we are in the short run or long run. Well, now we are in our long run. Accordingly, you could see that here it says, for the analysis of production function with two variable factors, we can use the concept called isocont or iso product curves. Now we are going to discuss about something called ISO product curves or ISO con curves, which is also similar to the indifference curve analysis of the theory of consumer behavior. Have you done indifference curves? What do you mean by indifference curve? Indifference curve means, I think you have learned it under principles of economics, isn't it? Indifference curves. Indifference. What do you mean by that?
And the person consume two different products in a particular time period. When the consumption will be that it's normally it will be increased and that. Now we have to sacrifice another product in terms of consuming the
Yes, that is what?
indifferent.
Indifference curves. Somewhat okay, not specifically, somewhat okay. Indifference means what? For an example, let's say you are going to a shop. In a very simple way, simple economics, you are going to a shop and you see that there's a fried rice and let's say burger. Don't you think that? Don't you feel what to buy? I'm asking in a general sense. Don't you feel what to buy? Whether to go with fried rice or whether to go with burger. Don't you ever feel it like that? So that is indifference. Because you believe that once you eat fried rice and once you eat a burger, the satisfaction that you will get is same. Accordingly, you are indifference. What to pick? Whether to go with fried rice or whether to go with a burger. That's a simple way of indifference. Simply, we are discussing about something called ISO product curves here. So that is related with the production function. Right? That is related with the production function. Right. So let us look at why this. What do you mean by this ISO con curves? Right? Now, here we are discussing about production with two variables, meaning that we are discussing about the long run. We are discussing about the long run. Now, in this particular, is that okay if I do it like this? Is that fine? Right. Now here, don't read anything of this particular slide. Just look at this particular table. Just look at this particular table. Now, here you have different factor combinations. Right? You have different factor combination A, factor combination B, C, D, and E. Assume that you are going to produce 100 units. Right? You are going to produce 100 units. And for you to produce that 100 units, there are 5 factor combinations available. Which means if you choose factor combination A, you can use 1 unit of labor together with 12 units of capital to produce 100 units. Clear? Similarly, if you choose factor combination B, you can choose 2 units of labor together with 8 units of capital to produce the same output. Similarly, if you consider about factor combination E, you could see that you are using 5 labor units together with 2 capital units to produce the same output. Okay. Now, when it comes to the indifference curve analysis, we consider about the satisfaction, isn't it? 2 products which give you the same satisfaction. Now here, when it comes to the isocons curves, we are considering about the output or the same output that could be generated from different what? Factor combinations. From different factor combinations. Right. So here you could see now, once you draw this in a graph, right? Once you draw this in a graph, here factor combination A, B, C, D, and E is there. And these are the units of inputs that you need. So if you draw this in a graph, you could see you are using 12 units of capital with 1 unit of labor. You are using 10 units of capital with 2 units of labors. Okay, you are using, what is the other one? Could be 5 units of capital with 5 units of labor. Right? And you are producing 100 units of output. Right? You are producing 100 units of output. So this curve represents the output that the company produces. So according to our example, this curve shows the 100 units of output. So we call this as isocont curve. Isocont curve. Why we say it like that? Because that is the output or the same output level that we can generate by using different factor combinations. Why we can differentiate, why we could change our factor combinations? Because now all our inputs are variable and now we are in our long run. Understood? Good. Accordingly, you could see now isofont represents, look at that. Isofont represents all those factor combinations which are capable of producing the same level of output. So you have 5 factor combinations, right? Different units, but all of them produces the same unit, 100 units, right? Then here it says, because of this, producer would be indifference between them. Like consumers, once you go to shop, you are indifference about whether to go with a fried rice or a burger. So now here the producer is indifferent because he can either use 1 unit of labor with 12 units of capital, or he could use 5 units of labor with 2 units of capital to produce the same amount. So he can't think what he should do. Okay, she gives indifference, right? He is indifference. Accordingly, that is what he says. Because of this, the producer would be indifference between them. Producer would be indifference between them. Okay, this is what we have done at the very beginning. So this table presented 2 factors, that is labor and capital, are being employed to produce a product. So we have 2 inputs, labor and capital. Each of the factor combination A, B, C, D, and E produces the same level of output, that is 100 units. So if we plot this on a graph, we call this as isocont curve. Curve that shows the same level of output that producer could produce from different factor combinations. Is that clear? From different factor combinations. So this represents 100 units. For an example, let's say you have more than one curve on this particular graph. Accordingly, we call it as isocont map. Why we call it as isocont map? Because you have more than one curve on a graph. So here it's 100 units, here it's 120, here 140, 200, 400, likewise you may have many. So when you are moving from left to right, it indicates that output increases. So when you are moving from this point to this point and this point to this point, it means that output increases. Clear? Right, so here it says the above figure 2 shows an isocont map or equal product map with a set of 3 isoconts which represents 100, 120 and 140 units of output respectively. Then from this set of isocont, it is very easy to judge by how much of production level on one isocont curve is greater or less than another. So by looking at this, you know that this curve represents 140 units. This curve represents 120. This curve represents 100. So very easily you can tag. Clear? So this is what you know as isocont curve. Isocont curve. Again, what is isocont? The curve which shows the same level of output that a producer could produce by using different factor combination. Different factor combination. And here you could see that when we were discussing about our short run, this labor was changed. But now we can also change our capital units as well. Yeah, the load. So could you please read these 2 slides and make a note? Please check whether you're okay with this. Think practically, speaking practically. Any doubt you can ask. Okay. Clouds. Okay. These online students, what do you think? Is this clear for you all? Hello? Online students, are you there?
Yes, sir. Is clear.
Any issues with the things?
No.
So we believe that you all had your breakfast, lunch, or dinner because we all had our lunch, isn't it?
Yeah, it's dinner time.
Okay. Right. So in a very simple way, now you know what is isomorph. Different output could be used to produce same level of output. If we plot this on a graph as a curve, we call it as isomorph curve. Right. So now we are going to learn something called MRTS. I think you are very familiar with this. MRTS, marginal rate of technical substitution, isn't it? Very clearly in our principles of economics, we have done this. Correct? Under consumer behavior. Right. So we are going to discuss about something called MRTS, or marginal rate of technical substitution. Now, when it comes to the consumer behavior, what do you mean by that? Marginal rate of substitution. Huh? Slope. How do you interpret the slope? Very good. Job is correct. How do you interpret that slope? Very good. Sacrification of one product to buy another product. Very good. So this is the sacrification. Very good. So when it comes to the marginal rates of technical substitution, now here we discuss about that one. But when it comes to this particular lesson, we are discussing about the producer angle. Right? Producer angle. So let us look at what is this marginal rate of technical substitution is first before we are moving to this theoretical aspect. Right? So here you could see there's a particular example. So we are going to learn about what is MRTS. First, we learn what is MRTS in a practical way. After that, we can move to the theoretical aspect. So don't read these things. Don't read these things. Now, you got to know that these are the factor combinations that we had earlier from A to E, and these are the inputs that we use, labor and capital, right? Now, for an example, let's say if the producer is producing by using the factor combination A, he is using 1 unit of labor together with 12 units of capital. Together with 12 units of capital. Let's say if he wants to pick factor combination B, how many labor units he want to use? How many labor units? Two. Two. He is using 2 labor units with 8 capital. So meaning that when this particular person is moving from factor combination A to factor combination B, he has to sacrifice 4 units of capital. Clear? He has to sacrifice 4 units of capital. And to replace that 4 units, he must want to increase his labor by 1 unit. Very good. He is sacrificing 4 units of labor, and it is an issue. So he needs to substitute, or he needs to replace that 4 units of capital. For that, he's increasing his labor units by 1. So 4 divided by 1 is how much? It's 4. So that this is what we known as marginal rate of technical substitution. Then again here. Now let's assume that this person wants to move from factor combination B to factor combination C. Now he is going to increase his labor units by 1 unit, and he is reducing his capital units by 3 units. So 3 capital units will be represented by 1 labor. So 1 laborer simply represents 3 capital units. Understood? 1 laborer represents 3 capital units. Here also. Now you could see it's further decrease. And if we choose factor combination D, the capital units will be reduced by 2, and again is increasing 1 unit of labor. Again, the MRT is 2 and here is 1. Is that clear? Simple, no? Marginal rate of technical substitution. The entire story is written here. Right, so let us look at what is this MRTS in a more theoretical way. So here it says marginal rate of technical substitution in the theory of production is similar to the concept of MRTS in the indifference curve analysis of consumer demand. So this MRTS indicates the rate at which factors can be substituted. Look at that. Factors can be substituted, or factors can be replaced at the margin without altering the level of output. That is the beauty. You can change your factor combinations, but you are not going to change your output level. Your output level remains how much? In this example, 100. Your output level remains 100, but you can change your factor combinations, but the output remains same. So that's the beauty, right? That's the beauty. Accordingly, in a more precise way, right? In a more specific way, marginal rate of technical substitution of labor for capital may be defined as the number of units of capital which can be substituted. Look at that. Number of units of capital which can be substituted by an extra 1 unit of labor, right? While keeping the output unchanged. Right? That is what MRTS means. Right? Number of units of capital which can be substituted by extra 1 unit of labors. Now in this question you could see, in this particular example you could see here, when you are moving from factor combination A to factor combination B, you are sacrificing 4 units of laborers. Clear? 4 units of laborers. And that 4 units will be replaced by 1 unit of laborers. So sorry, 4 units of sacrification of capital will be represented by an increment of 1 unit of labor. That is what simply we known as marginal rate of technical substitution. Same thing which I have written is here, right? Okay, so please read this. MRTS, marginal rate of technical substitution. The amount that you could substitute by increasing another factor without changing the level of output. Right? Get the practical idea. The practical idea. Don't humanize. Yes, online students. How about you? Is this clear? MRTS? Yes, Sirivardhana, are you there? Sirivardhana?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, Sadharuvan, Karunasena.
Yes, sir, we are there.
Perfect, clear.
If you have any doubt, please ask. Okay, clear? All of you? Fine? Now, what are the things that you know? You know what is? What is? Isocont curve. What is isocont curve? Yes. Just think about yourself. Just think. The level of output that a producer could generate from different factor combinations. Clear? Then what is MRPS, marginal rate of technical substitution? It considers about the replacement ability of the factors. Simply replacement ability of the factors. Right? Is MRTS. Are you all okay with this? Clear? How many units of labor would need to substitute for the candidate? Right? Okay, so let's go forward. Right. Right, so now we are going to discuss about general properties of isocont curves. After that, we are going to start isocost. Isocost. Now, these are the general properties or the features of a isocont curve. Right, now by looking at this, what do you think? Now, this is an isocont curve. What are its features? By looking at this, rather than just looking at the features and elaborating, by looking at this curve, what do you think? Is it upward sloping or downward sloping? Good. It's downward sloping. That's the first feature. It's downward sloping. And it is convex to origin. Look at that. It is convex to origin. So there's a huge bend here. Right? There's a huge bend here, meaning that it's convex to origin. Right? Origin means this point. Convexity means this point. It's convex to origin. Third one. What do you mean by that? Third one. Third one. Can you have isocons curves like this? Right? So this is a line. Now let's say this particular isocon curve produce 100. You have another one like this. Can you have why? What could be the reason? It cannot interchange, isn't it? Because here it's 200, 200. Here it's 100, again 200, 200. It can't be, it's not practical. Right? So this is the third feature of a isocont curve. So what is the first one? It's downward sloping, meaning that downward sloping means the slope is negative. And it's convex to origin. Look at the convexity. It's convex to origin. And no two isocons could go like this. Right? So these are the three features of an isocont curve. You could say isocons, like indifference curves, slope downward from left to right. This side is what? Left or right? Left. This right. So it's left to right. Then no two isocons can intersect each other. It couldn't happen. Third one is are convex to origin. Are convex to origin. Okay. Right. So now you know what are isocons, what is isocont map, what is marginal rate of technical substitution, then features of isocont. Now we are going to learn about the cost part of this. We discuss about the production part. Now we are going to discuss about the cost part, and that is denoted by isocost line. Isocost. Clear? Isocost. Now at the very beginning, let's see what is this. The prices of the factors are represented by isocost line. In a very simple way. The prices of the factors are represented by isocost line. So without reading these things, let's have the practical understanding and we'll move back to this. Is that okay? Much better. Right. Now, I think you all could see this. Right? You all could see this. So let's assume that I'll do it this particular board. So let's see. You are a producer. Right? You are a producer. I'll do the same example. And you have been given, right? You have been given 300 rupees, right? 300 rupees to do the production. 300 rupees to do the production. Right? So let's assume that, right? Price per labor is 4 rupees per labor and price of the capital, let's assume that it's 5. Price of the capital is 5 per machine hour. Here it's per labor hour, here it's per machine hour. You can understand, right? The machine hour as well as per labor. And the given amount for you is 300, right? You need to do a production as a producer and you have been given 300 rupees to do this production. And when you are doing this production, you are using the support of a laborers as well as the capital. And the price per labor is 4 rupees per labor and price of a capital is 5 rupees per capital. Now tell me, if you are doing this production by only using laborers, how many labor units that you need? Simply how many labor hours that you need? How many labor hours that you need? Huh? 75. Are you all agree? The total amount that has been given to you is 300 per labor hour. You have to incur 4 rupees. Accordingly, 300 divided by 4 is how much? 75. Is that correct? 75. 75. Now the other way around. Let's assume you are going to do this entire production by using only capital. So how many machine hours you need? 60. How you got it? It's simply 300. You are going to divide it by 5. Accordingly, 60 capital hours. 60 capital hours. So if we draw this on a graph, and if we draw this on a graph, you could see, right? So here you have your labor hours and here you have your machine hours. So if you do your production by using only laborers, it's 35 labor hours. Clear? And if you do your entire production by using capital, it's all about 60 machine hours. 60 machine hours. If you do your production by combining these two, it's like this. Clear? If you consider only about machine hours, it's 60. If you consider only about labor hours, it's 75. It's 75. But if you combine do your production, you have to do it like this. Understood? So it could be, let's say, it could be 50, right? Correspondingly, you need to get this value. So this curve, we call this curve iso cost curve. Iso cost curve. Why? This curve represents the factor prices of the factors. Clear? This curve represents 300 rupees. Clear? So this is what we known as ISO cost curve. ISO cost curve. Clear? Right. Okay. Now here, the same thing you could see here. Let's move the previous one. Now, the prices of the factors are represented by this ISO cost line. Now, out of 300 rupees, these are the factor combinations that you could bring into the company and do the production. Clear? These are the factor combinations out of 300 that you could get. The ISO cost line plays an important part in determining what combination of factors the firm will choose for the production. The firm will choose for the production. Either you could go for machines, either you would go for labor hours, or combination of both. Combination of both. Then, an ISO cost line. This is the ISO cost line. An ISO cost line shows various combination of how many factors? Two factors. Various combination of two factors that the firm can buy with a given outlay. What is the outlay here? Is 300 rupees. So this curve Udala shows the amount of or the number of factor combinations that the company could buy by using this 300 rupees. Okay? By using this 300 rupees. So this is what we know as ISO cost line. More important, we assume that the prices of the factors are given. It's already here. And constant for the firm will not change. If it change, what will happen? If the price of the labor change, this curve may shift this part, this side, or this side. If the price of the capital change, this curve could either start from here or here. Right? So we have sometimes prices of the two factors could be also changed or one factor. One factor. In other words, it is considered that the firm is working under perfect competition in the factor market. Perfect competition, because we know that perfect competition is the perfect market out of all markets that we are having. Right. So this is simply what ISO cost line simply says. It represents all the factor combinations that a producer could purchase by using a given amount of outlay. Okay. Right. Now you could see the same thing which I have drawn here. Here you could see a firm has 300 rupees to spend on the factors like we did, labor and capital. And the price of the labor is 4 rupees per labor hour, and price of the capital is 5 rupees per machine hour. So with the outlay of 300, he can buy 75 units of labor as well as 60 units of machines. 60 units of machines. And here you could see OB. OB means the 0B, 0B. In the figure represents 75 units of labor, and OA represents 60 units of capital. Very simple, simply explanation about this particular graph. Which means if the firm spends the entire outlay of 300 on factor X, which means labor, it buys 75 units for this scale OB, and if it spends its entire outlay of 300 rupees, he can buy 60 machine hours. 60 machine hours. Right. So we call this as ISO cost line. Now here you could see there is something called C divided by R. What do you mean by C divided by R here? C means your cost. That is what you have done here. C means your cost. R means rate of the capital. That is how you got this 60 here. C divided by R means that. And accordingly, point B, you could see that C divided by W. That means total cost divided by the price per labor. That's how you got this. I think it's 75 here. Then it says the straight line AB is the curve AB, joint points A and B will pass all combinations of labor and capital which the firm can buy with 300 rupees, right, based on the given prices. So therefore, this line AB all isocost line for whichever the combination line on it, the firm buys, it has to incur the same cost for outlay for the given price, right? So even if you are using this particular curve, meaning that whatever the product or whatever the inputs that you use, the amount is 300. The amount is 300. And finally, here it says an isocost line. This is how you technically define what isocost line is. An isocost line is defined as the locus of various combination of factors. Look at that. Various combination of factors which a firm can buy with a constant amount, constant outlay. So we call it as price line or outlay line. And this is how you calculate the slope of the isocost line, W divided by R. Okay, you know what is iso on curve? What is that? It represents the different output levels that the company could use to produce same level of output. And this is isocost. It shows what? The factor combinations that a company could use to produce an output by using a given level of budget or the outlay or the amount. Right. So could we rate this? 2 slides, please. Isocost line. Think practically, yeah. 8 and 3. At what time you are going to? 4 o'clock. Good, nice. Yeah, yes. Customer and this is the producer. Here the customer, the customer is given a particular amount of everything you choose. The producer. Right, sometimes factor price would change, right? So even though your isocost curve goes like this, here it's capital, here it's labor. If there is a change in the labor price, right, it could be like this, either that way or this way. Okay. Corresponding for the capital as well. Clear? But here we assume that the factor prices are given and it's constant. That's good, no? Okay, fine. So far, so good. What do you have today morning? Management fundamentals. Good. Yesterday? Statistics? Statistics and economics. Markets, component marketing. Three course units, isn't it? That's fine. Nice. Early in the morning, statistics, then marketing, then economics. What? Cool thought. Very well divided. Okay. So what is the most coolest subject out of marketing? Statistics. Very good. You like statistics, isn't it? That? Mark, it's also good, isn't it? It's also good. All the subjects are good, isn't it? Yeah, okay. Fine. Okay. So let's see what our online students are doing. Yes, students. Any update? Are you all okay with these things?
Can't see the board.
Hmm?
Online students,
Yeah.
they can't see the board.
They can't see the board. I think they should be stand. Now, can they see me? Now, can they see me? Are they texting?
Here we have board.
Ah, nice. Board in the sense, they can see the board or they cannot see the things that I have written here.
It's not here.
Yes, no. Anyway, they can see, right? They can see, but it's not clear. That's the issue. Isn't it with the issue of the angle? Because echo, once you see that particular screen, you could see that from the other way around, isn't it? The constraints. See, earlier it was like this, isn't it? Earlier, the camera was like this, isn't it? Or it take a stand like in Narvatra again, I can't do only that. Yes, if I change the pen and write little bit, bigger, is that fine? Okay, we'll try. Yeah, we'll try. Yes, Putra, we'll try. Yeah. It would be better if we can.
Excuse me, sir.
Right.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir.
It's auto adjusting, right?
Excuse me, sir. Can you hear me,
We
sir?
see.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
The thing
Yes,
is,
sir.
we can see you, but only thing is, whatever the thing you write on the board, we cannot. It's not clear.
All right, sure. I'll make it correct. Okay, thank you very much, Huda. an extreme is
If you
orange.
could you,
Right?
yeah,
So I'll
it's
make it
Can
okay,
you
sir.
green.
If
use
you
black color?
Okay, fine.
if you could use some dark color plane, then it will.
Yes, yes, I'll do it. I'll do it. Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
And also, sir,
Yeah.
could you please request the SAB team to do some changes for this camera, because continuous from the first day onward, we are requesting them to do some changes for this camera, but it's happening every day, happening the same. But every day we
Yes,
had to
sure,
take the
sure.
notes from the physical class students because the board is not clear.
Sure, sure. Noted, noted. We'll make it correct, right? Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank
thank you,
very
sir.
much. Thank you. So let's see. Now, is that fine? Can you all see this? I mean, we need to help the setting. Is this visible, all of you? Yes? These online students? Is this visible?
Yeah, sir.
Now it's fine.
Yeah.
Right, good, good. Okay, fine. Right, so thanks. Right, so thank you very much for providing the message. Right, so we will move forward. Right, so now, right, so now we got to know about what are isopont curves, marginal rate of technical substitution, isocost line. Right, so now we are using that particular knowledge to discuss our further things. Now here you could see we are going to discuss about law of return to scale, right? Law of return to scales. And actually we discussed this, isn't it? We have discussed this law of return to scales in our previous session. But here we are going to discuss this in a more detailed manner. This in a more detailed manner by incorporating this isopont curves. It's very simple. Right. So let's say this. Don't read these things. Right? Don't read these things. That's my first advice at the very beginning. Right. Now, you could see here, this is a graph, right? Now, in this graph, you could see there are many isopont curves are there. Many isopont curves, right? Starting from 100, 200, 300, and 400. And sometimes don't think about these numbers, just look at the shape or the behavior of this isopont map according to our current discussion. Now, there are four curves here, 100, 200, 300, and 400. And what we do to make our analysis simple, let's draw three curves from the origin. So here you could see the first curve is green line, that is OR, and the second curve is OP, and the third curve is OQ, right? And the third curve is OQ. We actually draw this for our simplicity, right? Now, when it's come to the return to scales, you know that there are three things: increasing return to scales, constant return to scales, and decreasing return to scales. If you closely look at the difference between these two curves, right? Between these two curves, AB, BC, CD, and likewise others, what do you think about the gap? Is it same, increasing or decreasing? The gap in between two isoponts. Is it same or increasing or decreasing? Huh? Gap. Little bit difficult to say because of the drawing. Right? Same to the gap between two isopont curves. Same or increasing or decreasing? Same. Meaning that this is how we illustrate constant return to scales on a isopont map. What do you mean by constant return to scales? When you increase your input in the same percentage, we believe that the output will be increased by the same, which is not practical actually. So here we could say the gap is same. The gap is same. So gap is same illustrate this is constant return to scales. Right? Constant return to scales. So let's read and we'll understand this. Actually, we have drawn this particular three curves to show this gap clearly. Right? To show this gap clearly. Right. So we'll see. Now here it says the constant return to scale means that with a given percentage increase in the scale, simply your inputs, or the amounts of all the factors lead to same percentage increase in your output. That is doubling of inputs, double the output. Clear? This can be illustrated diagrammatically by using of equal product curves. We call it as isopont curve. This is how we illustrate it. You have four isopont curves and the gap between all of these isopont curves are same, meaning that constant return to scales. So here it says, it will be seen from the figure that the successive isoponts, which means successive means upcoming one, are equal distance from each other long straight line drawn from the origin. These are the straight line that we have drawn from the origin to clearly illustrate this gap. Otherwise, you could see it, but it's difficult. Therefore, along the line OP, if you consider about line OP, right, COP, OOP, that is the red color line. You could see the difference between AB is equals to BC, and the difference between BC is equals to CD, right? So to illustrate it clearly, I have drawn these curves. Then, if you consider about line OQ, this blue color line, you could see the difference between A dash and B dash equals to B dash and C dash. And B dash and C dash equals to C dash and D dash. Accordingly, this green color line also say OR A double dash B double dash equals to B double dash C double dash. And that distance equals to C double dash D double dash. Right. So here it says the distance between the successive equal product curves being the same along any straight line through the origin, you could see, right? All are same. Means that if both labor and capital are increased in a given proportion, output expand by the same proportion. Right? If you increase your input by the same proportion, output will also increase by the same proportion, and that is the meaning of constant return to scales. And this is how you illustrate this on an isopont map. Okay. So what is the thing that you want to remember here? This distance is same or different? Same. If the distance is same, it's constant return to scales. Then, what is this? What do you think about the gap? Here, the difference between AB and BC, both are same or increasing, meaning this is increasing return to scales. Increasing return to scales. So increasing return to scales means what? If you increase your input by a percentage, your output will be more than that. That is this how you illustrate it. Right. Again, you could say increasing return to scales means that output increases in a greater proportion than the increase in your inputs. Right. So input increase by 30% and output will also increase by 50%. Output will be also increased by 50%. Here you could see, again, this is a isopont map, 100 units, 200 units and 300 units. The different, the gap is different and it is increasing. It is increasing. Don't worry about the numbers, just look at the behavior of the graphs. So here it says, when firm expands, the increasing return to scales are generally obtained in the beginning. So several factors account for increasing return to scales, and at least in the initial stage have been discussed in our part one. Can you remember? We discussed about increasing return to scales, and we discussed why we are having increasing return to scales. And I have asked you to find out a particular thing as a homework. Good. I think you all have done it. We'll see. So this is how you illustrate your increasing return to scales on a graph. Right? A graph. So please read these two: constant return to scales as well as increasing return to scales. Here, this BC is higher than AB. It will definitely increases. Especially it says when the firm expands, when the firm expands, and being lower, initial stage, the beginning of the loan. That's what this word is then the firm expands. Right? Easy. Easy things, no? Increasing, constant, and finally we are moving to decreasing return to scales. What do you mean by decreasing return to scales? When you increase your inputs, output will be higher, lower, or equal? Lower than the percentage increase your inputs because of these various issues, coordination issues, lack of resources, many issues are there. Now, accordingly, you could see if you look at this particular isofont map, right? Forget about these numbers. Just think about the distance. Just think about the distance. Now here, the gap between BC is higher or lower than AB? Lower than AB. The gap is low, but if you look at here this is 100. Output is 100. Here it's 150. 50% increment. But here, only output is increased by how many units? 30 units. Decreasing returns. Right? The gap is getting lower and lower. Right, so here it says decreasing return to scales. You know that when output increases in a smaller proportion than the increase in your inputs, decreasing return to scales are said to prevail. Input increased by 50%, and output by 30%. Clear? So this is how you illustrate this. Your gap between BC is lower than the gap between AB. Right? So when successive isocons lie at smaller distance or on an array to the origin, return to scales will be decreasing. Return to scales will be decreasing. So here you could say AB is lower than OA and BC is lower than AB. So it means that successively more and more of inputs are required to obtain equal increments in your output. So when you are using more inputs, your output is getting reduced. That is simply what decreasing return to scale means. So this is how simply we analyze increasing, decreasing, and constant return to scales by using a isocont map. Right? Isocont map. Clear? Now, I'm telling this constant return to scales. If we learned about constant return to scales, and it's not practical. I think we discussed the reasons in our last week session why we are saying it's not practical. Because if a particular producer has the opportunity to increase its output and increase its inputs as well as to increase its output, why he is obtaining constant return to scales? For an example, let's say the producer is going to increase his inputs, right? The producer is going to increase its input by 10%. Because of this reason, he knows that his output will be increased by 30%. As a producer, do you like this or not? As a producer, what do you think? Like or you like? Now, without achieving this 30%, you believe that will stop when the output increase by 10%. Will you do it? Will you? But you have the capacity to go beyond. In order to achieve something called constant return to scales, you are stopping from this. Will you do it? No, because we have the capacity to go beyond this. Accordingly, we are saying this constant return to scale is not practical. Okay, so you always trying to achieve more. Achieve more. Okay. Okay. So you have the potential to increase the output. Therefore, you do it. Right. Fine. Right. Any doubts on this, online students? What do you think? Yes. Are you all okay, Utana?
Yeah, it's fine, sir.
Right. Okay. So you're having your interval at 2:30, 3 o'clock. What you prefer? 3, 2:30? Okay, tell me. Right. So until such time, let's start this one. Right. So why the importance of the nature of return to scales? We are going to identify why this nature of return to scales are important. Right now, you know what are return to scales. There are three things: decreasing, increasing, and constant return to scales. So here it says the nature of return to scale is very important for two reasons. First one, the nature of return to scale as to whether they increase, remain constant, or diminish determines the average and the marginal cost of the firm. Average and the marginal cost of the firm. Now, what do you mean by that? Yes, what do you mean by that? Whether it is increasing, right? Increasing, decreasing. First, the nature of return to scale as to whether they increase, remain constant, or diminish determines the average and the marginal cost of the firm. Now, what do you think? When you are experiencing increasing return to scales, what do you think about your cost? You are experiencing increasing return to scales, which means your input will generate more outputs. What do you think about your cost? Higher or lower? Your cost is low, isn't it? Your cost is low. When you are experiencing decreasing return to scales, which means your cost is higher. Why? Why? Why your cost is high? Because we have a lot of coordination issues, right? So you need to incur more admin cost. Your overhead cost increases. Accordingly, the cost is high. But here, you may have a lot of efficiencies in your production processes. Right? Accordingly, the cost is low. So you need to identify this. And the second reason, the nature of return to scale and its effect on cost influence the firm's ability to compete with other firms in the same industry. Other firms in the same industry. Now, competition. Now you all are marketing students too. Not marketing, I'm studying marketing too. Now, what do you think? Competition. What do you think about the pricing of the company? Will it be a matter? It will be a matter. So to provide a better competition to the other competitors, you need to offer your product to the market at a reasonable price, at a fair price. Accordingly, if you are experiencing increasing return to scales in your company, we believe that our cost will be low. Accordingly, what do you think about the market price of your product? Will it be higher or low? It could be low. You're offering the product at a reasonable price or a fair price to the market. Accordingly, what will happen? Your existing customers keep with you, or you may have other new customers as well, because you're offering this product at a reasonable price to the market. But when you're experiencing decreasing return to scales, your cost is high. So you need to cover up this cost. You know that we are having cost and we are having the profit margin, and that is how we determine our selling price. Isn't it? Cost plus profit equals to selling price. Now here your cost is high. Then what you're trying to do? Do you like to operate with losses? No. As a rational producer, you are trying to bring your cost down and increase your revenue. But here your cost is high. Accordingly, you are trying to increase your market price of the product. Then what will happen? Some of your consumers may shift into other competitors. So this is why the return to scales are very important. First, you need to have an idea about what will happen to your cost structure when you're experiencing increasing and decreasing return to scales. Then based on this cost structure, how it impact to your market price to position your product in the market. Clear? Okay. This is why this nature of return to scales are important. Nature of return to scales. Yes, online students, can you all see the board properly? I mean, the things that I have written.
Yes, sir. Now we can.
Okay, fine, fine. Thanks. Okay. Any question can be answered, isn't it? Gut feeling? Right? Any question can be answered? Great. Right. Okay. So we'll move to at what time you need your break? Is it 2:30 or 3 o'clock? 3:50. You need your break now. Okay, fine. So let's have a break. Right. So 20 minutes break. Yes, online students, we are going to have a 20 minutes break. And now the time is it's 2:23. We are going to meet sharp at 2:43 in Sri Lankan time. Okay. Then we switch on Daisy, then okay. Daisy, Daisy. Right, shall we start? Yes, online students, are you all there?
Yes, sir, we can start.
Right. We're going to start, okay? Is anything from your end, online students? Is Chandrakanti from where are you?
New Zealand, sir.
Sorry,
New Zealand.
right. Again, Sunderland? Should I forgot? Yeah.
Sir, Dubai, sir.
Dubai, okay. What's the time right now?
It's 120, sir.
1?
120.
And your
1:20
lunch,
p.m. Yeah, I just finished, sir.
if you want, you can share it with us. Ne? You can switch on your video, you can show your table, isn't it? All of you, right, online students? Right, okay, so I truly believe that you all had some of the next. Right. Okay, so we'll start our discussion now. We are moving to something called ridge lines, right? We are moving our discussion to some theoretical area called ridge lines, right? Ridge lines, and please don't read, please don't read. Just look at the things that I'm doing. So thereby, I believe that you can have an understanding. Okay. Right. So now we are going to discuss something called ridge lines. Now, up to now, you know what are isocons, right? Isocost. What is the meaning of marginal rate of technical substitution? Then how you illustrate these return to scales, increasing, decreasing, constant return to scales using isocon map, right? So now, as the producers, right, we want to know what is the optimum or the factor combination for us to do the production. Right? So there could be many factor combinations, but we want to know what is the optimum factor combination. The region, simply the region of optimum factor combinations. Now, if you look at the factor combinations, right? If you look at the factor combinations, we want to know, or it would be better if we have the factor combinations which are technically efficient. Which are technically efficient. Technically efficient, and the marginal productivity. Right? Marginal productivity of the factors are diminishing but positive. Diminishing but positive. So we are saying if a particular factor combination is good, if you are having these two things, those are technically efficient, and the marginal productivity of the factor is reducing, but it's positive. Right? Reducing, but it's positive accordingly. Right? Now, if we draw a particular graph like this, I think you all can see this. Right. So these are three isocon curves that we have. Three isocon curves. Now, what is the main? This is little bit difficult, Muta. So please provide your fully concern onto this, into this. Right. Please provide your fully concern into this. Now, this is a. You could see there are three isocon curves: isocon 1, isocon 2, and isocon 3. Now, what is the basic feature of an isocon curve? The curve is downward sloping, meaning that the slope is negative, right? Slope is negative. So slope is negative, meaning that if you are reducing one factor, that amount must be represented by increasing another factor, right? But if you look at this particular curve, right now, what do you think about this point? and let's say here, this point. Above this point and after this point. Is it reducing or increasing? Yes, is it reducing or increasing? Like now, from this point to this point, it's downward sloping. But after this point, you could see that there's a small bend backward, right? Bend backward. Understood? What do you mean by that? Now here, from this point to this point, you are reducing your capital and you can increase your labor to replace that capital to keep the output as it is. That's what we learned, isn't it? But if you consider about these areas after this point as well as after this point, to keep the output constant, you need to increase both of your factors. You need to increase both of your factors. What do you mean by that? Let's say this particular isocon curve produces 100 units. 100 units. This entire curve produces 100 units. Up to this region, you can reduce your capital and increase your labor to bring this output level. Fair? So meaning technical efficiency is there. You are reducing one factor and you are replacing another factor for that. Is that good? What do you think? What is your general view about it? You are reducing one factor and you are replacing another factor. And you are producing the same quantity. Is it good or bad as a producer? What do you think? First, we need to have a discussion. Yes. What do you think about it? Is it good or bad? You are reducing capital and you are replacing labor. Reducing capital and replacing labor to bring the output level same. Is it good or bad? Or do you want to increase both of your inputs to bring this output level? What you choose? Are you getting what I'm saying? What do you think? Do you need to increase both capital and labor to produce this output level, or would you like to replace one factor to another and produce this? Replace. Replace. Hands up those who say replace. Okay. Hands up those who say better to increase both of these inputs. Right. Why is that?
Factors clarify the function of that factor.
Sorry.
If you choose one factor, you are more like dependent on that factor.
No, not only one factor. You are using both factors. You are using both factors. You are reducing some amount of capital, but you are replacing that amount from labor. You are using both factors, huh? You are using both factors. My question is again, I'm saying, do you want to increase both of your factors to produce the same output level, or would you like to replace one factor to another to do the production? Replace or
The cost and the benefit
yeah.
go replacement.
Yes, sir. So technical efficiency means you can replace one factor to another. Right? You are reducing your capital now. Here you could see if we go back, right? If we go back, here you could see now here your output is 100 units. Can you remember? Right. So you have these type of factor combinations. What you do, you are using your labor units as well as capital units. But here you are using 12 units of capital, but 1 unit of labor. When you are moving from this factor combination to this factor combination, again you are using both. But here capital is reducing. To replace that one, you are increasing your labor by 1 unit. So is this good or the other way around? This is good because in terms of cost and benefits, as a producer, this is good. So you have the factor replacement ability, right? So this is what we know as technical efficiency, right? You can replace one factor to another rule and do the reduction. You can do the reduction. Clear? Right, good. Thank you very much. Then you could see that could be done in between this region, right? You are reducing capital and replacing labor. You are reducing capital and replacing labor. Understood? Yeah. So you have to learn with this graph, huh? Otherwise you can't understand this. Clear? Right. So this facility is there, technical efficiency. But if you consider about this point, what do you think? Can you draw something like this? It's a little bit difficult, isn't it? It's a little bit difficult. Which means that if you are above on this particular point, you need to increase both of your capital, right? You need to increase your capital as well as you need to increase your labor to bring this output. Yeah, to bring this output. When it comes to this point also, same. You need to increase your capital as well as you need to increase your labor to bring the output up to this level, which is more costly. Yeah, which is more costly. Now, why it happens in that way? Why it happens in that way? Is this okay? Right, clear? Up to now, are you okay? Are you okay? Right, fine. Then, now, so here, what will happen in this particular point? We say that the marginal productivity of our capital is 0. In this particular point, we are saying that the marginal product of our capital is 0. After that, what will happen? The marginal product of the capital is decreasing, in the sense negative, right? Good. So during this period, right? During this period, marginal product of the capital is negative. Okay? Marginal product of the capital is negative. Here it's positive, but diminishing. This is what I told you. Marginal product of the factory is reducing, but keep positive. Clear? Now, above this point, you could see that your marginal product of the capital is 0. Sorry, negative, which means when you are increasing the level of capital, your output is getting reduced. Clear? Then, to keep the output level like this, what you need to do? When you are using more capital, your output decreases, right? To keep the output level as this 100, what you need to do?
Replace.
Very good. You need to replace with labor. Why? In this situation, the marginal product of the labor is positive. Understood? Shall I erase these curves? It would be better, I think. Online students, can you all see this? Check the message WhatsApp group. Can you all see this?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Right, okay, fine. Right. So above this point, the marginal product of the capital is negative, which means when you are using more and more capital, output will be low. Accordingly, to keep the output level as it is, you need to increase your labor units, which is labor units, since their marginal productivity is positive. Understood? Great. Similarly, here what will happen? Now in this situation, the marginal productivity of your labor is 0. Marginal productivity of your labor is 0. Then after this point, what do you think? Very good. When you are using more laborers to do your production, it may have a negative impact into your production, right? So your output decreases, but you need to keep this output level because this entire line represents this 100 units. So what you need to do? You need to replace capital. Why? Because the marginal productivity of the capital is positive in this situation. Clear? Marginal product of the capital is positive in this situation, meaning that when you are working on these areas, you need to increase your both capital and labor. Here also, when you are working after this point, you need to increase your capital as well as labor. Simply you are increasing both of your inputs. Clear? Which is not technically efficient. Which is not technically efficient. Is that clear? Right? So why it happens in like that way? When you are replacing more and more factors to another, it has some limits. When you are replacing capital for your labor, this capital is having some limits. After that, you need to support from your labor. Clear? Similarly, when it comes to this situation, when you are replacing labor for your capital, it has a limit. Right? It has a limit. Once that limit expanded, you need to again increase your capital. That's the simple story. Accordingly, if you look at this particular area, you could see you're sacrificing capital, some amount, so that you are increasing labor and do the production, meaning that technical efficiency is there. Technically efficient. Right? Technically efficient. And also, marginal product of the factor is decreasing, but keeps positive. Keeps positive. Is that clear? Accordingly, as a producer, tell me which range would you like to operate? Is it beyond these 2 points or in between these 2 points? In between these 2 points. Very good. In between these 2 points. Between these 2 points. So we call this as economic regions. Economic regions, and we say that these areas are economic nonsense. Right? Economic nonsense. Right? So if we draw this, I don't think I can draw it right now here properly. So let's assume that you have another 2 curves like this. You are having 2 curves, 2 or 3 curves like this. Right? So what we would do, again, these are the points where the marginal productivity is 0. So what we would do, we can draw a particular line which connects these 2 points. Which connects these 2 points. Like that way. Right? I'm going to erase this. I'm going to erase this. So these are the areas which help the producers to produce the given level of output with factor replacements. Clear? So therefore, we call these areas. This is 0, this is A, this is B, and we call these areas as ridge lines, where it connects the factor combinations which are marginal productivity is 0. Right? All these are our economic region of production. Right? Above these points, those are economic nonsense. That here. Right? Economic nonsense, and these are the economic region of production or economics regions. And so could you please draw this? Right? Please draw and please discuss by your own in this particular graph. These online students, is that clear for you all?
Yes, sir, it is clear.
So if you have any doubt, you can ask. So if you have any doubt, you can ask. Vertical axis is for capital and sorry, I couldn't express earlier. Vertical axis, horizontal axis for your labor, vertical axis is capital. So you can ask any question, any doubt. Yes. Easy. Right. So now here it says, let's move to the theoretical aspect.
Excuse me,
Right.
sir.
Now here, let's read the same thing. Here you could see, before explaining which factor combination, right? Before explaining which factor combination a firm will use for production, whether it could be labor or it could be capital or both. It will be useful to demonstrate the region in which the optimum factor combination will lie. Region, optimum factor combination. Now here, if you look at this particular area, this is the optimum factor combination. Why? Here you are replacing your factors and doing the production. Okay? Optimum factor combination. That is what we want to identify first. And we did. And here it says, the second point, there are regions in the production function where isocont may have positively sloping segment, simply bend backwards. Now after this point, usually in between these two areas, the slope is negative. But after this point, the slope is positive, right? Because you are using both of these factors. Then it says, the above OA, see, you could see OA line, which means these areas. The above OA and the below line OB after these areas. Slope of the isocont is positive, which means that increases in both capital and labor. Look at that. After this point, increase in both capital and labor are required to produce fixed quantity of output. Are required to produce fixed quantity of output. You need to increase both labor and capital. Here, labor and capital to keep the output level as it is. Right? To keep the output level as it is. So production techniques, simply the factor combinations, lying on these positively sloping segments, which means these areas are technically inefficient. Why? You need to have increment in both of these factors. Both of these factors. So technique or factor combination is technically inefficient. Look at that. If it requires more quantity of both the factors for the producing a given level of output. So that is the meaning of technical inefficient. You are using your capital as well as laborers to produce the output rather than replacing it. Right? So you could underline this, highlight defects. Right. Right. So here it says the above line OA, the same thing which we discussed. Right. Everything has written here. The above line OA, which means these areas. The marginal product of the capital has become negative. Look at that. The marginal product of the capital has become negative, which means output decreases using more capital. When you are using more capital, the output decreases if your labor amount is held as it is. Therefore, to keep the output constant, we need to produce this. Therefore, to produce this, what we need to do, when the capital with negative marginal product increases, labor with positive marginal product has to be increased. Now, in this situation, what happens? Marginal productivity of the labor is positive and you need to increase it, right? Otherwise, you can't predict the given level of output. Conversely, other way around. To the right of the line OB, which means after this point, right? This is OB line. After this point, the marginal product of the labor becomes negative. Okay? After this point, marginal product of the labor is negative. Which means to keep the output constant, capital with positive marginal products. Marginal product of the capital is positive in this area. So you need to increase it. Clear? With the increase in the labor input having negative marginal products. So therefore, this line OA and OB, you have line OA and you have line OB, and we call these as ridge lines. Since it's the boundary, which the marginal productivity of the one factor is 0. Now here the marginal productivity of the capital is 0. Here the marginal productivity of the labor is 0. So once you draw a line by connecting those points, we call it as ridge lines. Okay, ridge lines. Finally, it says the ridge line OA connects OA connects those points of the isoforms where the marginal productivity of the capital is 0. You could say here the marginal productivity of the capital is 0. So once you draw a line by connecting all these points, it's a ridge line. On the other hand, in here, the marginal productivity of the labor is 0. You could draw a line like this. Okay. Yes. So therefore, the ridge lines are the locus of points. Now the same thing is there in the previous slide. Therefore, the ridge line are the locus of points of isoforms where marginal product of one factor is 0. Here, the marginal productivity of the capital is 0. Here, the marginal productivity of the labor is 0. And you are drawing a line by connecting all these points. And in between these two, you have your economic region. That is where the optimum factor combination lies. Clear? Optimum factor combination lies. And this is the answer for this one. And before explaining which factor combination the firm will choose for production, it will be used to demonstrate the region in which optimum factor combination lies. So this is the region in between line OA and OB. Okay. Please read these three slides. Get the idea. You need to discuss with the graph. You need to discuss with the graph. These online students, are you okay with these things? Yes, are you all there?
Yes, sir, it's clear.
Right. Hey, Karuna Sena. What do you think?
Yes,
Is it fine? Right.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, what about others? All are okay? So if there is any issue, you can ask. Right? Are you all okay? Any doubts? Any doubts? Create a doubt and ask. Yes, okay. Fine. Congratulations. Right, so this is little bit difficult to understand, but I believe that all of you are okay because this is highly technical, right?
Excuse me, sir.
Ah, yes,
Small doubt, sir.
yeah,
The main difference between these inside this two line, that is 2 points, and outside that point, inside that 2 points, that means one factor need to reduce to increase the other factor. But when it's come to the outside of the that two main points, both factors has to increase to
yes,
keep the
of
constant
course.
production level. Is it that? Is it
Yes.
okay, sir?
Yes, correct,
Okay,
correct.
thank you, sir.
Right, so if you look at this, I think you can see this. If you look at these areas, you need to increase both of your factors. As well as below these points, again, you need to increase both of your factors. But in between, you can replace one factor with another. Right? Okay.
Yes, sir. Clear.
Okay, fine, good.
Thank you, sir.
Right. Fine. Okay. Right. So now we are moving to the final part of your first lesson. Final part of your first lesson. Happy? Happy? Right. So that is the expansion part. Very simple one. Very simple one. Expansion part. Now we have learned isocon separately, isocost separately. What we do is we are going to incorporate these two right now. We are going to incorporate these two right now. Right. Okay, so please don't read these, huh? Don't read these again. That is my humble request. Don't read. Right. Now, again, if we refresh our memory again, what do you mean by isocon? Isocon means the same output level that a company could get by using different factor combinations. So here you have how many isocon curves? How many isocon curves? 4 isocon curves, 100, 200, 300, and 400. And here you could see these blue color lines. What are those? ISO cost curves, which represent the factor prices, which represents the factor prices. Now, here you could see there are some points E1, E2, E3, and E4. Now, what happens at that point? Here you could see your isocon is tangent with your iso cost. So once we draw a curve by connecting all these points, we call it as expansion path. Meaning, if you are going to produce 100 units of output, this is the minimum cost that you have to incur. That is E1. If you are producing 200 units, E2 is the minimum cost that you have to incur. And this is the factor combination that you have to use, right? This is the factor combination that you have to use to produce this 100 units of output and also which minimize your cost. What do you think about this region? You may use this factor combination with this factor combination, but can you produce it within the given budget? You can't. If you look at this point again, here again 100 units, but you are using this number of factors together with this number of labor units. You could produce, but can you do it within the given budget for that particular 100 units? You can't. So likewise, right, all these points are the lowest cost points to produce the given level of output. So once you draw a line by connecting all these points, we call it as expansion path. Now, why there's an equal distance between these isocost curves? What could be the reason? That is isocons. Now here isocost. You see the gap is same because the factor prices are, if it increases, that is same. Clear? Okay. Right. So here it says, in here, it look at how the entrepreneur will change his factor combination as he expands his output given the factor prices. Right. So we know that the factor prices are given, and we are going to look at what is the minimum cost combination, factor combination to produce a given level of output. So here it says, assume the prices of the two factors, labor and capital, are such that are separated by this particular line, AB, isocost line. In the given figure, 4 isocost lines are there. First one is AB, second one is CD, the other one is UL, and the other one is GH. All isocons are parallel to one another. You could see all these are parallel to one another, indicating that prices of the two factors remain same. Prices of the two factors remain same. That is why you have a parallel shift here for the distance. If the firm wants to produce the output level denoted by Q1, which means in here the company is going to produce 100 units. It will choose the factor combination E1, right? Factor combination E1, this much of a capital and this much of a labor, which minimizes the cost of production. Clear? Which minimizes the cost of production. You could also pick this. You also could pick this, but you cannot do it within the given budget. Within the given budget, that's the issue. So accordingly, E1 being the point of tangency between the isocon Q1, isocost line AB, the tangent part. So the line joining the minimum cost combination, such as E1, E2, E3, and E4, is called expansion path. Expansion path, since it shows the factor combination width which the firm produces will alter as the firm expands its level of output. Clear? In a very simple way, here you have your isocon curves, isocost curves are there, and there are points where both of these two are tangent. And if we draw a line by connecting all these points, we call it as expansion path. Why we call it as expansion path? Because to produce the given level of output with the given budget, that's the minimum cost that you have to incur. Clear? That's the very simple analysis of this. Right? And these are some other illustrations regarding the same thing that we have done. Better to read up to this point. These are for additional readings, but better to read up to this point. Right? Only first bullet point of this particular slide. So if the factor prices are different, your isocost curves could be shifted either right way or left way. Right? So that's the end of your first lesson. That's the end of your first lesson. What do you think? Is it difficult? Don't say average, moderate. Don't say. So what do you think? Is this difficult or easy? Difficult or easy? Difficult or easy? Difficult. Difficult. Difficulty arises due to final slides. Huh? Only final 5 to 6 slides, isn't it? Before that, easy. So majority is easy, according it's easy, isn't it? So according to accountant's perspectives, let's assume that there are 50 slides. And out of that 50 slides, this bridge lines and the expansions part covers nearly 10 slides. So 40 slides means how much? 40 out of 50. Yes, percentage. 80%. 80% is easy. 20% is as a whole, we see. Right? Okay, so now again, a small summary regarding the things that we have discussed. We have fully completed your first lesson, that is business firms and production decisions. Right? Business firms and production decisions. Now, in this particular lesson, what you have learned, I mean, the first lesson, the first part, and the second part, now, right? You have learned what is business economics. Simply, we are using the methodology of the economic with the theory to bring optimum solutions for the problems faced by company. So that is what business economist does, right? Then we discuss about production function. Right? Production function is what, just remind yourself, just remind yourself whether you are okay with these things. Online students as well. We discuss about production function. Production functions means what? It shows the relationship between input and output. So output is a function of inputs. Simply output depends on inputs. That is why we mentioned that later as functions. Then we discuss about the assumptions in our production function, and we got to know that there are two types, that is short run production function and long run production function. In long run production function, we are having two types of inputs, that is fixed and the other one is variable. And you know now, right now, you know why we are having those two types of inputs in the short run, right? Then when it comes to the long run, our all inputs can be varied, since we know fixed inputs are there in our long run production. In the short run, producer failed with a particular issue. So we call it as diminishing marginal returns or flow of variable proportions. Why? He can increase his variable inputs, but he cannot increase his fixed inputs because it's fixed. Accordingly, after some time, after some point, the average productivity and the marginal productivity of the labor, simply the variable unit, is getting low. So it's an issue, right? Thereafter, we discuss about three curves: total product curve, average product curve, and marginal product curve, and we analyze why those curves are behaving in a different way. That is because of diminishing marginal returns. Okay. Thereafter, we started discussing about long run production. When it comes to long run production, you can change all of your inputs. You can change your scales accordingly. You can get the maximum benefits. So there are three ways: increasing, constant, decreasing. And we identify why increasing return to scales are there, why constant return to scales could be there, and why decreasing return to scales are there. With the illustration, and I told you why we are seeing the constant return to scales are not practical, right? So that's the end of the first part of our first lesson. Today, we have started the second part of our first lesson, that is production function with variable inputs. Simply, here we discuss about we can change our inputs. There is nothing called fixed inputs. All inputs are variable, meaning that we discuss about long run. In here, we discuss something called isoproduct curves, meaning that it represents the output level that a company could produce by using different factor combination, same output level that a company could produce by using different factor combination. So if we draw on a graph and we call it as isocon curves. And if we have more isocon curve on a graph, we call it as isocon map. Then we discuss something called MRTS, marginal rate of technical substitution. It's illustrate how you can substitute one factor to another. And we have analyzed it based on that particular example. Then we discuss about features of the isocon curve. It's downward sloping, convex to origin, that bend is there, and no two isocons could interchange, right, or intersect. Right. Then we started discussing about isocost line. So it shows the factor combinations. Then we got to know how to draw these isocost line. What is its slope? Clear? Right. Then we started discussing about these return to scales in a more detailed way by incorporating isocon curve. If the gap in between isocons are same, we call it as constant return to scales. If the gap in between these isocons are increasing, we call it as increasing return to scales. And if the gap between these isocons are diminishing or reducing, we call it as decreasing return to scales. And that is how you illustrate your return to scales by using isocon curves. Fine. So after that, we started something, different area, that is ridge lines. I'm not going to give you a summary about ridge lines because if I do it, sometimes you get confused again. Ridge lines. And please remember that we want technically efficient factors and marginal productivity of the factor could be diminished, but it keeps positive. Right. Then finally, we discuss about ridge lines. It shows the minimum cost or the factor combination that a company, that a producer could use to produce a given level of output. Okay, so that's the end of your lesson 1, and this is the time for you to ask any question. You can ask any question. Yes, online students, you can ask any question. Yes. Online students, are you all okay with the things? Yes. Any doubts? Are you all in the platform?
Sir,
Yes.
sir, that actually one point. It's not a question, sir.
Yeah.
In this, when you draw the ridge line, you can
Yeah.
see that the marginal productive labor is positive and the capital become negative.
Yes.
And I cannot understand this point. Actually, I couldn't understand. So then, how come it become negative, and one point how it become positive?
Yes, sure. Just a moment. I will explain it. Right. Just a moment. Right. So your issue lies with at these areas, Buddha, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Now here you could see now this axis represents capital. This axis represents labor. Now
Labor.
in this point, the marginal productivity of the capital is 0, which means when you are using capital, there is no any change in the output. In this point, marginal productivity of the labor is 0, meaning that when you are using more laborers, there is no any change in your output. But if you go beyond this point, right, marginal productivity of the capital is negative. But after this, marginal productivity of the capital is positive.
Positive.
Now this is okay. Our issue is with this area.
This area.
So your marginal productivity of the capital is negative, meaning that when you are using more and more capital, your output will be lower. But this is a isocon curve which represents the same level of output, and we need to produce that output level. Accordingly, what we have to do in this situation, the marginal productivity of the labor is positive. So what we do, we mix both labor and capital, and we increase, simply we are using both capital and laborers to keep the output level constant. Is that clear?
Yeah, now I got it, sir. I got it. Yeah.
Right. Now, after this point, right, your marginal productivity of the labor is negative, meaning that when you are using more and more labor as a replacement of your capital, it has its own limit. After that time, your labor cannot give, or your labor cannot produce any magics to your output. So when you are using more laborers, your output getting reduced. So again, we need to maintain the given level of output. What we do? Yes, we are using more capital as well,
More capital.
together with laborers to keep the output level same.
Okay, so okay, I got it. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, fine, good.
Bye, bye.
Great. Yes, others? Right, so that's the end of our first lesson. And we are going to start our second lesson. I think I have uploaded the relevant lecture materials to LMS. Right? Have you all downloaded it? Cost of production. Right? Yeah, chapter number 2. Do you need a break? Need a break? Need a break? Okay. 5 minutes break? Is that enough? 5 minutes break, huh? We are not going here and not staying here. Okay, 5 minutes break. Here's online students. Now our students needs a 5 minutes break, so we'll wait, huh? Just a 5 minutes, huh? Have you all signed? Most importantly, sign. Right, shall we start? Right, yes, students, now we are going to start our discussion, online students. Right, okay. Fine, so now we are going to start second lesson, that is cost of production, right? That is cost of production, very simple lesson. Simple lesson, but there would be some difficulties as well. Together it's simple, right? Right, so these are the learning outcomes of this particular lesson, meaning that once you complete this lesson, you should be able to perform this. What are the things? To describe cost concepts such as total cost, fixed cost, variable cost, average, MC, short run and long run cost. Very simple things, right? Then identify the costs related in the short run and the reasons for the U-shaped of such curves, and identify the cost related to long run and the reasons for the behavior of the long run cost curves. And finally, calculate the profit maximizing output by using total and the marginal approaches. I will be discussing that one in your next lesson. That's why I have mentioned it as later, because I believe it's more match with the next lesson. And so these are the knowledge areas that you are going to get. This is the agenda, in a very simple way, short run cost and long run cost. Right. Okay, now what do you mean by cost of production? In a very simple way, cost of production. Yeah, the cost that you incur to produce a particular product in a very simple way. That is what we know as cost of production. Now, in the short run, first we are discussing about the short run cost. Now we are having two types of cost in the short run, right? We are having two types of cost in the short run. What are those? Fixed cost and the variable cost. Now, fixed cost goes like this is the cost, and this is the output level. your fixed cost goes like increasing, decreasing. Yeah, it's constant. It goes like this, isn't it? Because it's fixed. The rationale is it does not depend on level of output. Right? It does not depend on level of output. Example, rent fee. Okay. So you could either have state fixed cost or something like that, but initially it's fixed, right? For example, let's say let's take a look at that rent example, right? You are rented out a particular factory and the cost is 50,000. But during the COVID period, you didn't do any production. Do you need to pay that amount? You have to pay, right? So when you are schooling, right? So you had to pay your school van during your vacation, right? So it's fixed cost because that particular person is allocating a particular seat for you. Okay, so that's the example for the fixed cost, right? Fixed cost. Then the other one is what? Variable cost. Here you have your cost, and here you have your unit of output. So what about the behavior of your variable cost? Increases from where? From which point? From here. Why is that? Yeah, if you don't do any kind of production, you don't have a variable cost, isn't it? So accordingly, your cost goes like this, right? So it's variable cost, right? Your cost goes like this. If you don't do any kind of a production, your variable cost is zero, but it increases when you're increasing your level of output. Accordingly, the summation of these two is equals to your total cost in the short run. Total cost in the short run. Very simple things. Right? Yes. So here it says fixed cost. Do I want to explain this? Fixed cost. Could you please read this? That's better. Fixed cost and variable cost equals to total cost in your short run. So please read this. So you could see the total cost of a business is the sum of its total variable and fixed cost in the short run. Clear? Okay. Right. So now this is the behavior of your total cost curve, total variable cost, as well as your fixed cost. Okay. Now, right. Now, your total cost here, you could see your total cost starts from the point where your fixed cost starts. Is it correct? Why? Because if you do not have any output, still you have to bear your fixed cost. Accordingly, your total cost only consists with your fixed cost. That's why your total cost curve starts from this particular point. Clear? And you could see there is a gap in between your total cost and total variable cost. And this gap is same. Why is that? Yeah? Due to fixed cost. Due to fixed cost. This gap is same. the gap or the difference between total cost and total variable cost is same. Why? It represented by your fixed cost. And if you look at your total cost curve, it goes like this, and your variable fixed cost is this. So what this gap represents by? The difference between your total cost and fixed cost. Little by little it increases. It illustrates your variable cost. Good. So that's how you analyze, huh? Small things, but right. So here it says the vertical distance, right? The vertical distance between the total variable cost and the total cost is constant throughout. This is because the vertical distance between these two curves represents the amount of fixed cost in the short run. And the vertical distance between your total cost and your total fixed cost is represented by the variable cost, right? The variable cost. And here you could see the shape. Right? You see the shape of the total cost is exactly the same as your total variable cost, since the same vertical distance separates these two curves. Always the distance is same. Right? Always the distance is same. Right. So now we are going to look at short run average cost. Right? Average cost curves. Now, why this average cost is important? Any idea? We are having total cost, that is the sum of fixed cost and our variable cost. Why we are calculating average cost? Is there any reason for us to calculate it? Average figures? Yes. Average figures. Now, for you to make decisions, do you need data or information? For you to make decisions, information. Now, you need to determine the selling price per product. You need to determine the selling price per product. So what is the information that you want to know? You need to make a decision, right? You need to make a decision of what? You need to determine the selling price of your product. How do you determine the selling price of your product? Selling price per unit. How we determine?
Based on the cost.
Based on the cost. Which cost?
Uh,
Per unit cost. Another name for per unit cost is average cost. Another name for per unit cost is average cost. So that is why these average figures are important, right? So here you are having your average cost per unit. Then what you do? You are going to add a profit and you are calculating your selling price. So this is the decision that you want to make, the price of your product. Accordingly, you need to know cost per unit or cost per product. So that is why we need this average cost. Simply how we calculate total cost, we are going to divide it by quantity. Total cost, we are going to divide it by quantity, and that is how we get this average cost, and we are adding the profit portion and we are getting the selling. So this is why average cost is very much important for you to make decisions. Yes, of course, you have the total cost, but selling price will be determined based on per unit basis. So you need to bring all these total cost figures into per unit basis. Clear? Right. It says the concept, the cost concept is more frequently used both by businessmen and economists in the form of cost per unit or average cost rather than totals. Now, when you are doing your budgets in your companies, first you need to bring these into very small units, right? So then you need to analyze it, right? So we are calculating cost per unit. Right. So now we have something called what? Is this particular term? Is that okay? Right. Okay. So let's say the total cost of producing a particular item is 100,000. Total cost of producing a particular item is 100,000. This total cost could be broken down into average cost. Clear? How we calculate our average cost? Total cost, we are going to divide it by quantity. Clear? Then this average cost comprises of two things. First one is your average fixed cost. Average fixed cost. Clear? And the other one is what? Your average variable cost. So how you calculate your average fixed cost? Average fixed cost?
Divided by 2.
Yes, total fixed cost. You are going to divide it by quantity. Average variable cost. You have your total variable cost. You are going to divide it by quantity. Clear? Right. Now here, your average cost is equals to how much? Your total cost is 100,000. Let's say the quantity is 1,000. Accordingly, your average cost is equals to 100. It's LKR 100. This is your average cost. This is your average cost. Similarly, let's assume that out of this 100, right, out of this 100, 60,000 is your variable cost. 60,000 is your variable cost. 60,000 is your total variable cost, and output is 1,000. Accordingly, variable cost per unit is how much? 60. Variable cost per unit is 60. Then your total fixed cost must be 40,000. Your total fixed cost must be 40,000 divided by 1,000 and it's 40. Clear? Right? Accordingly, this is your average variable cost. This is your average fixed cost. The summation of these two equals to your average cost. Clear? Some very simple things. The summation of these two is equal to your average cost. So accordingly, we could say average cost is equals to your average fixed cost plus average variable cost. Yes. Average cost is equals to the average variable cost plus average fixed cost. Understood? Right. Okay, so here it says average fixed cost is the total fixed cost simply divided by the quantity. Divided by the quantity. And here you could see, if you look at your average fixed cost, let's assume it's the total fixed cost is 40 unit, 40 rupees, and the output is 20. Therefore, here the average fixed cost is 4, and here it's 2. Now, what could be the behavior of your average fixed cost? Is it increasing, decreasing? What do you think? Behavior of your average fixed cost? Increasing,
Decreasing.
decreasing. Correct. Why? Yes, good. Now here this cost is fixed anyway, but the quantity is increasing. So simply this much of a cost is being distributed among this much of a units. Accordingly, the IFC average fixed cost is reducing. Right? Average fixed cost is reducing. So here it says, since the total fixed cost is a constant quantity, average fixed cost will steadily fall as output increases. Why? Therefore, the average fixed cost curve slopes downward throughout its length. It goes like this. As output increases, the total fixed cost spreads over more and more units, and therefore AFC becomes less and less. Now you could see this cost does not change, but the output changes. Right? Accordingly, the huge number of output is going to be divided by the fixed cost. Right? Accordingly, the answer is lower and lower. Right. So once you multiply the average fixed cost from your quantity, you are getting what? Total fixed cost. Now here it says any point in average fixed cost curve multiply with the output, you are getting your total fixed cost, and it is same. It is same. This is because the product of the average fixed cost and the corresponding quantity gives you the total fixed cost. Right? If you multiply your average fixed cost from the quantity, very simple, you are getting your total fixed cost, and we call it as rectangular hyperbola because your fixed cost curve goes like this. Accordingly, we call it as rectangular hyperbola. It's fixed, no? It's a rectangle, isn't it? So we call it as a rectangular hyperbola. Right. Okay. Then this is how you calculate your average variable cost. Simply, you are going to divide your total variable cost from the quantity. And here it says the behavior of your average variable cost, and we'll see how it goes. Right. So here it says average variable cost will generally falls as output increases from 0 to the normal capacity, right? Due to the occurrence of increasing returns. And this average variable cost first falls, reaches the minimum, then increases. We'll see why it goes in that way. Right. So up to this point, could you please read, check whether you're okay with these things? Very simple things, huh? Very simple things. Yes, online students, are you okay with the things?
Yeah, it's fine, sir.
Right? Okay. So we'll see these things in our later slides. At the moment, please skip this part. Now. I will explain this part later on. Right. So here it says average fixed cost first falls, reaches a minimum, and then rises. We'll see how it happens. Accordingly, we need to know the relationship between average variable cost and average product. Right? Shall I guess this? We need to know the relationship between average variable cost and average product. Right. So here we are going to discuss about relationship between average variable cost and average product. Right. So here this axis is your average product, and here you have your label. Here you have your label, and this part represents your average variable cost, the quantity. Right. So now you know that when your average product increases, right? When your average product increases, which means your productivity is good. What do you think about the cost? Average product increases. Then your cost, average variable cost, decreases, right? When you are increasing your average productivity, your average variable cost decreases at the very beginning. Very beginning means initially when you are increasing your average product, average variable cost decreases. When you reaches the maximum level of your average product, what will happen? Your average variable cost will be minimum, right? Minimum. Then you are starting to get lower average productivity. Accordingly, what will happen? Due to the inefficiencies in your production process, your average variable cost increases. This is the second point. Second point. And this is the third point, and this is the third point. So this is the behavior of your average product curve, and this is the behavior of your average variable cost curve. When your average product increases, your average variable cost decreases due to the efficiency in your production process. Then when you touch the highest level in your average product, your average variable cost will be minimum, right? Your average variable cost will be minimum. After some time, you know that due to certain issues, your average productivity is getting lower. Accordingly, your average variable cost increases. Okay, so this is something upside down. Something upside down. So this is the relationship between average variable cost and average product. Relationship between average variable cost and average product. And draw this, the relationship between average product and average variable cost. Right, so here it says the average variable cost and average product, they be inversely with another. Now, this is the relationship. When this increases, this decreases. When it reaches the minimum point, average variable cost reaches its minimum point. When this reaches its maximum point. When it starts decreasing, average variable cost starts increasing, which means this goes in an opposite way, right? In an opposite way. So therefore, the relationship is negative. That's what here it says. Average variable cost and average product vary inversely. Inversely means negative relationship with each other. So we could see, therefore, when the average product increases in the beginning, as more units of the variable factor are employed, the average variable cost must be sorted. Very good thing. When you are increasing your average product, average variable cost is decreasing. On the other way, and when the average product of the variable factor falls, which means this part, average product of the variable factor falls, the average variable cost must be increasing. Increasing. At the level of output at which the average product is maximum, the average variable cost is minimum. The average variable cost is minimum. So therefore, we could say the average variable cost curve looks like the average product curve turned upside down. Turn upside down. If we turn this in this way, that is the average variable cost. Right? Upside down with the minimum point of the average variable cost curve is linked with the maximum point of your average product curve. The maximum point of your average product curve. Clear? So this is the simple relationship between average product curve and average variable cost curve. Okay, good. Right. So now actually we discuss about average total cost, average fixed cost as well as average variable cost. And I told you that this is what we realized here. Average variable cost first falls, then reaches the minimum, then it increases. And I have asked you to skip this part. So now we are going to learn that one. Right. Now you know the behavior of the cost curves. Total variable cost, total cost as well as total fixed cost. Now this is the behavior of your average cost curves. This is the behavior of your average cost curves. Right? So this is your average fixed cost. Right? This is your average fixed cost. Right? Then this is the behavior of your average total cost. Right? This is the behavior of your average total cost curves. Right? And you could see so this is how your average variable cost curve goes. Right? This is how your average variable cost goes. Now, in this particular illustration, you could see that your average variable cost curve declines quickly and increases. Right? This is the minimum point of your total cost curve. Right? This is the minimum point of your total cost curve, and this is the minimum point of your this is the minimum point of the average total cost curve, and this is the minimum point of your average fixed cost curve. Right? So you could see that your average variable cost decreases, reach a minimum point and starts to increase before your average total cost does it. Can you see? Right. Now, the point is, here your average variable cost is decreasing and it starts to increase, but still your average total cost is decreasing. What could be the reason for that? Can you understand this? Here your average variable cost decreases, reach a minimum point and start to increase. But still your total cost curve is decreasing. What could be the reason for that? Any idea? No idea? Yes? Excellent, that's the answer. Now here you could see your average fixed cost is decreasing and the weight and the power of that average fixed cost is higher than the average variable cost. Accordingly, at this level, the total or the average total cost is only listening to average fixed cost. Clear? Accordingly, though our average variable cost decreases and increases immediately, our average total cost does not do it. Right? Does not do it. That is the exact answer. The rate of this decline of this average fixed cost is higher than average variable cost. Right? But after some time, now you could see that after this point, our average total cost starts to increase. Right? After this point, our average total cost starts to increase. Meaning that now the power after this point, the declining power of the average fixed cost is lower and the increasing power of average variable cost is high. Accordingly, now this average total cost is listening to the average variable cost. Now here you could see that both of these lines are very closer to each other. Why? Now here the average fixed cost is lower and lower. Accordingly, the huge portion of our average total cost is being captured by average variable cost. That's why these two goes like this way. Clear? That's why these two goes in this way. It should be either from here or like this. Okay.
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Kunal? Yeah.
Can you explain it again, sir? Because board was covered to your body.
Oops. Yeah, sorry. Right, so
Thank you,
here you could say that this is your average fixed cost curve and it's declining. This is your average variable cost declines and it starts to increase. Then here you could see this is your average total cost. It declines and starts to increase. And if you look at your average variable cost, here you could see it declines first and reach a minimum point and starts to increase before average total cost does it. Right? Before average total cost does it. The main reason is even though our average variable cost reaches the minimum point and starts to increase, our average total cost only listens to the behavior of our average variable cost. The main reason is the weight of this declining or the proportion of this declining of this average variable cost is higher than the declining of our average variable cost. Accordingly, at the very instance, our average total cost reaches the minimum point after certain time that average variable cost does it. That's the main reason. And after that, you could see our average total cost starts to increase. Now, it is going to listen to the behavior of the average variable cost curve. The reason is now the power of our average variable cost is, average fixed cost is low. That's the main reason. Is that clear?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Fine. If you can understand this, no need to read this. Right? If you can understand this, no need to read this. The thing is that your average total cost takes a little bit more time to reach its minimum level. But average variable cost does it before. Right? Does it before. The reason for this is at the very beginning, your average total cost is only listening to your average fixed cost. As you correctly mentioned, the decline rate of the average fixed cost is higher than the declining rate of average variable cost. Accordingly, our average variable cost decline and reaches the minimum point, our average total cost does not do it. Right? But after certain time, you could see that now again the average total cost starts to increase. That is because now the rate of this decline of this average fixed cost is low, but the rate of increasing power of this average variable cost is high. Accordingly, average total cost moves along with the average variable cost, and here it's more closer. Right? Is it okay? Now, what are the things that you know when it comes to the cost of production? It's a very easy topic. Now, you know, when it comes to the short run, we have two types of cost. Those are fixed cost and variable cost. Total cost comprises with FC and VZ. And you know the behavior of your FC, VZ, as well as the total cost curve. And we did a small analysis regarding these three cost curves. Then we started discussing about average cost curves, or simply average cost, average fixed cost, as well as average variable cost. And we discussed why we talking about these things, because when you are making decisions, you need information. So we need to bring all these big things into small quantities. That's why we are calculating these average figures. Thereafter, we discuss about the relationship between average variable cost and average product. The relationship is what? The relationship is negative. So there's a negative relationship between average variable cost and average product. Thereafter, we discuss about the behavior of the average curves, average total cost curve, average fixed cost curve, as well as average total cost. So the key point that you want to remember is at the earlier stage, the average total cost is only listening to average fixed cost. That is, the weight is high. But after some time, after certain point, our average total cost is now is going to listening to this average variable cost, because now the power of this ABC is higher than AFC. That's why these two cost curves goes like this. It's very closer. Right? Understood? Okay. Right. So the final part for the today's lesson, that is marginal cost. Marginal cost. Very simple. What do you mean by marginal cost? In a very layman type of way, marginal cost is what? Yes, the additional cost that you need to incur if you produce additional unit. Right? Additional cost that you need to incur if you produce one additional unit or one unit. That is marginal cost. Right. So here it says marginal cost is addition. Right. Marginal cost is addition to the total cost caused by producing one more unit of output. Right? If you produce one output, additionally, what is the additional cost? That is simply marginal cost. So here it says marginal cost is independent of the fixed cost. Marginal cost is independent from the fixed cost. Is that correct? Why? You know? Asha, yeah.
The variable cost.
Yes, so simply, very good. Simply the marginal cost is the variable cost. Right now we are thinking about what is the additional cost that we have to incur if you produce additional units. So which means the cost is changing. Right? So variable cost is the only cost that is changing, not the fixed cost. So that is what here it says. Marginal cost is independent of the fixed cost. Right? Then here it says, units of the fixed cost do not change with output. There are no any marginal fixed cost when output is increasing the short run. We don't have something called marginal fixed cost. It's fixed. Either you produce or not, it's fixed. So marginal cost only consider about variable portion. Variable portion. So therefore, you could say the marginal cost are in fact due to the changes in variable cost. Due to changes in variable cost, and whatever the amount of fixed cost, the marginal cost is unaffected by it. Marginal cost is unaffected by it, because marginal means changing, right? Fixed cost, is it changing? No, only the variable cost. So accordingly, we are considering about variable cost. And you could see here, marginal cost is simply the slope of our total cost curve. Slope of our total cost curve. And this is how you calculate the marginal cost. Simply, that is the difference between your total variable cost divided by change in quantity. Change in quantity. And here the topic is the relationship between marginal cost and marginal product. Again, the same, right? The relationship between marginal product and marginal cost. Now, this is also same as the relationship between average product and average variable cost. So here you have your marginal product, the labor units. Here you have your marginal cost with the quantity. Now, you know that when you are increasing when the marginal product increases, what will happen to the marginal cost? It decreases. When you are increasing your marginal cost, marginal product, marginal cost decreases. When the marginal product reaches its maximum point, marginal cost reaches its minimum point. Marginal cost reaches its minimum point. After that, when your marginal product decreases, what will happen? Your marginal cost increases. So simply again, we could find a negative relationship between marginal product and the marginal cost. Marginal product and the marginal cost. It's come to the average product and the average cost, the same relationship. Same relationship. Yes, online students, are you okay with this?
Yes.
Right. Right, so you need to know the rationale behind this, huh? That's what is important. You need to know the rationale. Why when this increases, why decreases? Why when this decreases, why this increases? That's the rationale you want to know, huh? Always rational, logical aspect and the practical aspect. Right? Right, so here it says the marginal cost of production is intimately related to the marginal product of the variable factor, which means there's an inverse relationship between these two. In the short run, since output is increased by increasing the amount of the variable factor, keeping fixed factors constant, marginal cost is equals to total variable cost divided by quantity. Right? In the short run, what do you think about the long run? Are we having something called fixed cost in the long run?
No.
No, simply change in total cost divided by change in quantity. So here in the short run, we are considering about change in total variable cost. Right. Accordingly, here it says, so the marginal cost of production is equal to the reciprocal of the marginal product of the variable factor. Now, this is the behavior of your marginal cost. It is equal to the reciprocal of the marginal product, right? Multiplied by the price of the variable factor. Once you multiply this MP with the price, you are getting the marginal cost. Marginal cost of the production, this one, equal to the reciprocal of the marginal product of the variable factor multiplied by the price of the variable factor. Accordingly, marginal cost varies inversely with the marginal product of the variable factor. So this is the marginal cost and this is the marginal product. It varies inversely. Negative relationship between these two. Right? Negative relationship between these two. If reciprocal of the marginal product means 1 over NP multiplied by the price. It's mathematics, huh? 1 over NP multiplied by price. Simply, better to remember there's a negative relationship between marginal product and the marginal cost. Okay. Negative relationship between these two, and you need to know why it happens. As I explained. And we learn these things, diminishing returns. At the very beginning, marginal productivity and the average productivity increases. Due to diminishing returns, marginal productivity and the average productivity decreases. As a result, marginal cost and average cost increases. I believe that you all could remember that part. Okay. Right, so that's the end for today. Yes. Happy? Do you want to continue? Right, okay, summary, right? In a very simple way, we started cost of production. Cost of production means the amount that you have to incur to produce a given level of output. So first we discussed about, and we are discussing about short run part. And here we have two types of cost, that is fixed cost and variable cost. Fixed cost does not move with the level of output, but variable cost does. Accordingly, in the short run, our total cost equals to fixed cost plus variable cost. Then we understand the relationship and the behavior of these three cost curves. Accordingly, we shifted to consider about these average cost figures. We learn about average cost, average fixed cost, average variable cost. And we learn the behavior of these three curves. And it's very strategically, you need to analyze, right? Behavior of this average total cost with the behavior of this average variable and average total cost, right? Then we discuss about the relationship between average product and average variable cost. So which kind of a relationship is that? Average product and average variable cost. Which kind of a relationship? It's a negative relationship. Then we just finish the theory behind the marginal cost. In the short run, only changing cost component is our variable cost. Accordingly, we are considering this total variable cost to calculate our marginal cost. We are not considering about fixed cost. Why? It does not change with the level of output. Right. So finally, we discuss about the relationship between marginal product and marginal cost. Again, it's negative. When the marginal product increases, marginal cost decreases. Marginal product decreases, marginal cost increases. Right. So you know, when we were discussing about these diminishing returns, we learned this average product increases and the marginal product increases at the very beginning. But after certain level of output, both of gets reduced. Clear? So that is the rationale behind these relationships. So that's what you want to know, the rationality of each and everything. Right? Is it clear? Online students, are you all okay? Yes, are you all okay?
It is clear.
Right. Okay, fine. Any doubts? You can ask any doubts. Huh? If you have any doubts, you can ask. No doubts. We just want to live, isn't it? Right. Okay, so thank you very much, and we'll meet you in future date. Right, so thank you very much. Study well, huh? Right, okay, bye. Goodbye. Take care. The students, you can leave. Online students, goodbye.